Think you know Clint Eastwood? The name conjures images of squinting eyes, a granite jawline, and a whisper-quiet menace that could silence a room. Iconic, undeniably, but peel back the layers of that carefully constructed legend, and you'll find a truth far more compelling, far more human. Because the path of Clint Eastwood, the Hollywood titan, wasn't paved with golden bricks and effortless ascents. No, his journey was a brutal climb over jagged rocks of rejection, humiliation, and near failures that would utterly shatter the carefully sculpted image you hold in your mind. Imagine, if you can, Dirty Harry himself, told point blank he was simply unfit for the screen, his career declared dead before it even sputtered to life. This isn't just a biography, it's the untold story of Clint Eastwood, a raw, unflinching look at a journey riddled with soul-crushing doubt and repeated humiliation. A world away from the smooth, preordained rise to superstardom that so many casually assume. Hollywood's gilded gates didn't just creak open and welcome young Clint with open arms. In fact, they slammed shut, and with a resounding echo that must have reverberated through his very bones. The infamous Universal Studios, a monolithic force in the Dream Factory, made a decision in the early 1950s. A decision they've likely spent decades trying to bury in the vaults of studio history. They dropped Clint Eastwood. Let that sink in. The reasoning, delivered with the cold corporate detachment Hollywood is famous for. He was, and I quote, too slow. Too slow in his speech, too slow in his movements, just too slow. But the insult didn't end there. Adding a final, almost comical jab to the gut, they also cited his chipped tooth as another glaring defect. Yes, the man who would become a global symbol of rugged masculinity, the epitome of unflappable cool, was deemed aesthetically and temperamentally unsuitable for the silver screen because of a minor dental imperfection and a perceived lack of zip. Early roles? A depressing parade of embarrassing flops, the kind of B-movies that flicker in the dead of night on late-night TV, destined to be forgotten by all but the most dedicated cinematic archaeologists. He was a lab assistant in Revenge of the Creature, a pilot in Tarantula. Roles so small, so inconsequential, they barely registered. He even endured the cinematic catastrophe that was Ambush at Cimarron Pass, a western so utterly excruciatingly dreadful that Eastwood himself would later publicly shudder at the mere mention of it. He confessed, with characteristic understatement, that it nearly drove him to abandon acting altogether. Picture this scene: Clint Eastwood, sitting slumped in a darkened movie theater, forced to watch himself in this cinematic train wreck, the shame burning in his cheeks, the dream of stardom dissolving into a bitter, acrid taste. He turned to his then-wife, Maggie Johnson, the words heavy with defeat. "I'm going to quit. I've got to start doing something, anything, with my life instead of this." Clint Eastwood, ready to trade in the flickering illusion of Hollywood for the cold, hard reality of a regular job, utterly convinced he was, in fact, a failure. It's a portrait of vulnerability, of crushing disappointment, a world away from the unshakable legend we know today, isn't it? His supposed breakthrough, the role of Rowdy Yates in the long-running TV western Rawhide, wasn't some meticulously orchestrated career move, some masterstroke of strategic genius. It was in reality a stroke of sheer dumb luck, bordering on the accidental. He wasn't the first choice for Rowdy, not even close. Dozens of actors auditioned, Hollywood casting directors frantically searching for the right face to fill the saddle. Eastwood was, almost as an afterthought, thrown into the mix. He walked into the audition, another face in a sea of hopefuls, carrying the weight of countless rejections and the lingering sting of Universal's brutal dismissal. But Rawhide, against all odds, against the prevailing cynicism of network executives, became a surprise runaway hit. It galloped into homes across America week after week, and with it rode Clint Eastwood. Suddenly, inexplicably, he was a familiar face, a presence in living rooms from coast to coast. But here's the insidious trap. Rawhide, in its very success, typecast him with an iron grip. Hollywood, in its maddeningly predictable way, could only see him as one thing, one archetype, one dimension: a cowboy. The Stetson, the spurs, the laconic drawl. It was a comfortable box, a neat label. Studios, ever risk-averse, couldn't or perhaps wouldn't see past the hat and the horse. To their limited vision, Clint Eastwood was Rowdy Yates, and Rowdy Yates was Clint Eastwood, forever and eternally bound to the dusty plains of television. But Eastwood, simmering with ambition, with a restless creative spirit, felt suffocated, trapped by the very success that was supposed to liberate him. He was desperate, almost claustrophobic, yearning to escape the predictable, repetitive narratives of weekly television, desperate to prove he was more, infinitely more, than just a sidekick cowboy in a predictable Western. The solution, audacious and bordering on career suicide, a risky, some would say utterly insane, move to a cinematic Wild West that was being forged thousands of miles away, in a place where Westerns were being violently, operatically, and controversially reinvented. Italy. Sergio Leone's Italy. It was a gamble of epic proportions, a desperate leap into the cinematic unknown, a move that, by all conventional Hollywood wisdom, should have ended his career before it had even truly begun. Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. A fistful of dollars, for a few dollars more. The good, the bad, and the ugly were cinematic grenades hurled into the placid waters of the American Western genre. They were unlike anything America had ever witnessed in its beloved cowboys and Indians mythology. Gritty, morally ambiguous, drenched in sun-baked dust and sudden, shocking violence, they were a stark, almost brutal departure from the clean-cut, white-hatted heroes of Hollywood's carefully sanitized golden age. And at the heart of this cinematic revolution was Clint Eastwood, the man now famously known as the Man with No Name. But back in the hallowed halls of Hollywood and in the influential pages of American film criticism, the reaction was scandalized. Critics, guardians of cinematic tradition, recoiled in horror. They dismissed these Italian-made spaghetti westerns with contempt, branding them as cheap, garish imitations, too excessively violent, morally bankrupt, and worst of all, simply not real westerns. And Eastwood himself, the enigmatic figure at the center of this storm of controversy, his performance, his minimalist, almost glacial portrayal of the Man with No Name, was particularly targeted. He was slammed as wooden, emotionless, almost automaton-like, a cipher rather than a character. American critics, steeped in the tradition of method acting and emotionally demonstrative performances, simply didn't get it. They failed to grasp the power of Eastwood's understated performance, the simmering intensity beneath the surface, the sheer force of his silent screen presence. The pressure mounted, a suffocating weight of critical disdain and industry skepticism. Studios, ever attuned to the prevailing winds of critical opinion, whispered amongst themselves, questioning Eastwood's judgment, his sanity. He was making a catastrophic mistake, they murmured, alienating his American audience, tarnishing his rawhide-honed image. He should, they urged, come crawling back to safer territory, to roles that conformed to the established, comfortable mold. Was he, they wondered, with thinly veiled glee, actively, consciously ruining his career? Was the Man with No Name, this iconoclastic figure he embodied with such unwavering conviction, just a cinematic joke to American audiences, a fleeting European fad destined to vanish as quickly as it had appeared? Did Clint Eastwood, standing at this precarious crossroads, teetering on the brink of career oblivion, almost buckle under the crushing weight of critical condemnation, ready to abandon the very role, the very cinematic persona that would ultimately, against all expectations, define him, not just as a Western icon but as a global superstar? But acting, even iconic acting, wasn't the summit of Eastwood's ambition. From those early soul-crushing days of rejection and humiliation in Hollywood, a secret, almost audacious desire had begun to take root and grow within him, the burning, insistent desire to direct. He'd spent years on sets, not just passively reciting lines, but actively observing directors, studying their craft, dissecting their choices, learning, absorbing, growing increasingly, almost arrogantly, convinced that he could not only act in films, but that he could, in fact, direct them, and direct them better, direct them his way. But Hollywood, that insular, self-congratulatory bubble, reacted with laughter. dismissive, condescending laughter. "Direct? You? Clint, be realistic," was the patronizing refrain that echoed through studio corridors and industry lunches. "Just stick to what you're good at. Stick to acting, Clint," they'd chuckle, patting him on the back with thinly veiled contempt. Studios, blinded by their own self-importance and narrow definitions of talent, saw him as a star, a reliable box office draw, a commodity to be exploited, not a creative force to be unleashed. Getting his first directorial projects even considered, let alone greenlit, was a brutal, soul-destroying uphill battle. Pitch meetings turned into thinly disguised mockery sessions. Funding applications were met with polite but firm rejections. Doors once again slammed shut, each one echoing with the same dismissive message: "You're an actor, Eastwood. Know your place." Doubt, insidious and corrosive, began to seep into even Eastwood's steely resolve. Was he delusional? Was this directorial ambition just a foolish vanity project, a star's ego run amok? To get his nascent vision off the ground, to silence the doubters and prove his own worth, Eastwood had to take matters into his own hands, to resort to a level of self-reliance bordering on cinematic desperation. He began to pour his own hard-earned money into pre-production, mortgaging his future, taking colossal personal risks, betting everything, his reputation, his finances, his very sanity, on himself, on his untested directorial abilities, at a time when absolutely no one else in Hollywood, not a single studio executive, not a single influential producer, would even consider placing a single dollar, let alone a shred of faith, in Clint Eastwood, the director. Hollywood didn't believe in Clint the director, not for a single solitary second. They were, collectively and spectacularly, about to be proven very, very wrong. In a move that utterly, breathtakingly defied all prevailing Hollywood expectations, Eastwood leveraged his now considerable, albeit critically questioned, star power to direct Play Misty for Me. But even here in his directorial debut, he refused to play it safe, refused to conform to expectations. He didn't direct a Western, the genre that had, however controversially, made his name. No, he plunged headfirst into the murky, psychologically complex waters of a dark, unsettling thriller. Yet another audacious genre jump, another deliberate, almost defiant challenge to Hollywood's stubbornly narrow, limited view of him and his capabilities. It was a low-budget gamble of epic proportions, shot with a lean, almost guerrilla filmmaking efficiency, completed in a breakneck 39 days. Every decision, every scene, every frame was a huge personal risk for a first-time director venturing into uncharted territory. Then, against all odds, against the ingrained cynicism of the industry, something utterly, unexpectedly transformative happened. Play Misty for Me wasn't just good. It was genuinely, undeniably brilliant. Critics, those same critics who had sneered at his spaghetti westerns, raved, almost tripping over themselves to heap praise upon Eastwood's directorial debut. Audiences, drawn in by Eastwood's star power and the film's chilling premise, flocked to theaters not out of curiosity, but out of genuine, captivated engagement. The film became a resounding commercial and critical success, a seismic shockwave that reverberated through the smug complacency of Hollywood to its very core. Suddenly, overnight, Clint Eastwood wasn't just a movie star, a questionable Western icon, a wooden actor. He was, undeniably, unequivocally, a director to be reckoned with, a force of nature behind the camera as potent and compelling as he was in front of it. Play Misty for Me wasn't just a movie. It was a defiant, thunderous statement from Clint Eastwood to the entire Hollywood establishment. "I'm more than you think. I'm more capable than you imagined. And now you're going to have to pay attention." Play Misty for Me was not just a fluke, a lucky strike in a long career. It was a declaration of intent, a bold opening salvo in Eastwood's relentless pursuit of creative autonomy. He wasn't content to merely direct. He craved something far more elusive, far more valuable in the cutthroat world of Hollywood: complete, unadulterated control. He was weary of studio interference, sick of compromising his artistic vision to appease nervous executives and risk-averse committees. He yearned to make films his way, to tell stories on his terms, unfettered and uncompromised. So, in a move that epitomized his fiercely independent spirit, he doubled down on his defiance, forming his own independent production company, Malpaso Productions. The name itself, Malpaso, Spanish for misstep or bad step, was a slyly subversive wink at the Hollywood establishment that had so readily dismissed him, a quiet acknowledgement of the perceived risk, the bad step he was taking by venturing out on his own. Malpaso was more than just a production company. It was a fortress of creative independence, a shield against studio meddling, a declaration of war against the conventional Hollywood system. Under the Malpaso banner, Eastwood forged a unique, almost revolutionary filmmaking style. He became legendary for his fast, brutally efficient, and remarkably low-budget productions, a stark, almost insulting contrast to Hollywood's bloated budgets, endless reshoots, and notoriously glacial production schedules. He stripped filmmaking down to its bare essentials, eliminating waste, streamlining processes, and fostering a collaborative, almost familial atmosphere on set. He proved, time and time again, that you could make high-quality, critically acclaimed films quickly, economically, and without sacrificing artistic integrity, challenging the very foundations of how Hollywood had always operated, forcing the industry to confront its own wasteful excesses. Clint Eastwood wasn't just a star anymore, wasn't just a director. He had transformed himself into a renegade filmmaker, a cinematic maverick, rewriting the rules of the game, proving that true power in Hollywood came not just from fleeting fame, but from the unwavering ownership of your vision, the unyielding control over your creative destiny. Even as a seasoned, Oscar-winning director, firmly entrenched in the Hollywood pantheon, Eastwood never lost that rebellious streak, that inherent willingness to take risks, to push creative boundaries, to defiantly shatter expectations. His later career, far from resting on past laurels, was marked by a continued, almost restless exploration of diverse genres, challenging themes, and complex characters that stretched far beyond the confines of the action hero image that had initially defined him. Then came Unforgiven in 1992, a film that wasn't just a Western. It was a profound, elegiac deconstruction of the Western myth itself, a revisionist masterpiece that was dark, brutal, morally ambiguous, and utterly mesmerizing. It ripped apart the romanticized, simplistic narratives of the Old West, exposing the violence, the brutality, and the lingering psychological scars beneath the surface of the genre he had helped to popularize. Genre expectations, not just challenged, but utterly, irrevocably shattered. Years later, in 2004, he delivered $1 Million Baby, a boxing drama that initially lured audiences in with the promise of underdog triumph and sporting glory, only to sucker punch them with a devastatingly tragic narrative twist, leaving viewers emotionally reeling, profoundly moved, and utterly unprepared for the film's heartbreaking conclusion. And then, the ultimate, undeniable validation, the hushed reverence of critical acclaim, the golden glow of multiple Oscar wins, Best Director, Best Picture, for both Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby. These weren't just awards. They were a coronation, solidifying his legendary status, not just as a durable action star, not just as a commercially successful director, but as a true cinematic auteur, an artist of profound depth, nuance, and enduring power. From that painfully rejected young actor dismissed as too slow and chipped-toothed, to the globally revered, Oscar-laden director, Clint Eastwood's journey became the ultimate, quintessential Hollywood comeback story, a breathtaking testament to the transformative power of risk, the unwavering strength of defiance, and the enduring, unbreakable force of unshakable self-belief. So, the next time you see that iconic image, the squint, the jaw, the whisper, I urge you to think again about Clint Eastwood. Forget the simplistic, two-dimensional caricature of the unflappable, invincible icon. The real story, the story that truly resonates, is infinitely more compelling, infinitely more human, infinitely more inspiring. It's not a tale of effortless ascent, but a raw, visceral chronicle of relentless struggle, of constant, soul-crushing rejection, of battling inner doubts and external skepticism, of defiantly, stubbornly, refusing to be defined or limited by the narrow expectations of others. Was it those early rejections, those public humiliations, those constant, grinding battles for creative control that ultimately forged the legend of Clint Eastwood. Perhaps, in the grand, paradoxical tapestry of Hollywood history, his greatest, most enduring, most transformative roles were not those he played on the silver screen, but in the arduous, often agonizing process of overcoming the seemingly insurmountable odds stacked against him, in relentlessly, audaciously, proving everyone who dared to doubt him, spectacularly, irrevocably wrong. What aspect of Clint's improbable, often unbelievable journey surprised you most profoundly? Share your thoughts, your revelations, your own perspectives in the comments below.